Hello and welcome to the CBB Supershow, brought to you by the FTN Network. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, a.k.a. Dub Deuces 85, the niche sports connoisseur and college basketball aficionado. We just got done grinding a long day of college hoops, ending with a solid night slate thanks to Adeem Bana, Trey Hannibal, and a few others. Main slate was great. Jaden Epps came through for us. Afternoon was a bit of a brick, but we'll take 2 out of 3 slates all day long. Punching the first ticket to the tournament in 2024, the OVC champions, Morehead State, led by NAIA superstar Riley Minix, and the great shooting by Thelwell. Many more tickets to be punched, many more conference tournaments to grind through. There is a lot of fun games tomorrow. There'll be some opportunities for us to bet, props, all of that stuff. The slate that we're going to be talking about here for a DFS perspective is just a 6-game slate with all Big Ten teams, kind of a slap in the face to a degree. There were opportunities for other games, like from the MVC tournament, for example, and the Big South to be on this slate. Didn't happen for us, unfortunately. They could have made this an 8, 9, 10-game slate perhaps, but whatever. We had the 6-game slate. This is what we're going to go through. If you are new to the program, I appreciate you checking us out. If you're a return veteran of the show, make sure you pull up your seat, grab yourself a coffee, donut, whatever it is you want to do, and all of us come together, hit that like button together. It does help the show so very much. I appreciate it. We are doing some really, really big numbers, biggest numbers in show history, in fact. And as we get closer to Selection Sunday, more and more people are finding us. There's going to be a lot of fun stuff. I did mention we're going to have our bracket contest, which we'll be setting up there for FTN members. We'll also be having some leagues, piggybacking a little bit. Did get re-invited to the RotoWire League. Basically, you're drafting players from different teams. The longer those teams last, the better for you as you acquire more and more fantasy points. So we're going to have some 9, 10, 12-man leagues there throughout. And if we get a lot of people wanting to do those, we'll do multiple leagues. Cash prizes and FTN swag will be available. Exciting stuff. All right, what we do here on the FTN CBB Super Show is cover DFS slates for CBB in a tried and true game-by-game breakdown. So we're going to talk about all 6 games here in depth, our favorite plays, anyone who may be underpriced, overpriced, sneaky plays, any DVP spots, maybe a posh play or two, giving us some sneak. Jaden Epps delivered as the posh play. We'll see if we can find another one. And if you are not a member of FTN yet, FTNbets.com and FTNdaily.com, still opportunities there. We provide content for every slate with projection sheets. We also have player pools, cores, and lots of other things that we do in the tracker, such as PrizePicks, underdog, and overall prop betting and betting in general. Everything you need to be successful, we do it. Every sport, not just college, pro sports as well, esports, everything. Let's get into it. Let's do it. Kicking things off, Nebraska versus Michigan. This is a total of 150.5. Now, it's the second highest total on the slate. A lot of these are kind of like 135, 140, kind of just standard Big Ten basketball. But this one does project a little bit higher, and Nebraska does come in as a 5.5-point favorite. As far as plays here, Michigan, this is a lame duck team, right? Juwan Howard is kind of tanked here. All the talk about how great Michigan's going to be, and Juwan Howard's a really good guy, but it's just not working here. Michigan has been dealing with injuries. Doug McDaniel had to deal with the road suspensions there. Obviously, that is over now, so he is available. They are without Oliver Mkwa. The Tennessee transfer has been a big part of what they've done this year. He's done for the year. And Jalen Llewellyn, who held down the fort for Doug McDaniel on the road, does have an official questionable designation there as he deals with a knee issue. Has missed the last few games here. Seems like he is more on the doubtful side than probable. We'll see what happens with Michigan. There are going to be some players here in consideration. I did set up the early part of the projection sheet. I will be editing that. And just in case you're wondering why I'm not super lively, I'm actually really tired. This was a long day, and pulling those all-nighters is tough here. So we're going to kind of whip through these 6 games, and then we're going to do our best to wake up bright and early in the morning and get right back to work here. But looking at it, Doug McDaniel priced appropriately for once at 7-4, which means he is no longer an auto play. I do think people will still jump on him because of his high usage rate and all the shots that he does take, but I actually respect Nebraska's defense here, and that 7-4 price point doesn't necessarily move me all that much. I would rather pay 5-3 for Namari Burnett, who's going to play 30-plus minutes. That's a much more reasonable option to me. Or perhaps Terrace Reed, who's at home, not maybe getting into foul trouble, sitting there at 6'2" with his fantastic overall rebounding rates, getting to bang down low with Juwan Gary. We'll see what happens with that individual matchup. Terrence Williams also somewhat interesting at 5'7". And then you have the cheapies like Will Schwetter there, Trey Jackson, some of those kind of mediocre overall options, but they're there if you need them. Where it gets exciting is with the Nebraska side. Obviously, a road matchup. We've been trying to avoid road bigs where possible. Juwan Gary is just a phenomenal overall option. His rates are strong. He projects extremely well every single slate, seemingly. We have been having him at a relatively low price for the most part. Now he's priced up here at 7-4, which is definitely putting us to the test and making us have to actually think about it before we click his name in. Absolute banger of a game against Rutgers last time out in 32 minutes, 5 of 15 from the field, 11 rebounds, 3 blocks and a steal, 15 points, 41 overall fantasy points. The way he is playing in this system reminds me so much of Derek Walker, that prototypical, stand at the high post, run the quarterback role. You can take an elbow jumper. You can make the extra pass to the three-point shooter, hit the cutter. You can put the ball on the deck a little bit. You can bang down low. You can take threes. Just so versatile, which is why Juwan Gary is so great in this Mayor, a.k.a. the Mayor Fred Hoiberg system, that he is such an awesome play overall, even at this price of 7-4. I think that kind of puts people off, but he reminds me a little bit in the same spot we just saw Adeem Bana here. I like the matchup for him individually. He's not at home like Bana was tonight, but he's just going to have that same type of upside, 40-plus fantasy point type of upside. Overall, one of the highest offensive ratings on the team. He is shooting 33% from long range on 77 attempts. So, he's a little bit undersized for a 4, and sometimes he plays a 5, but he's really tough. Has a 10.5% offensive rebounding rate, a block rate over 3.5%, and again, has that versatility to step out and hit threes. Shot rate has ballooned up to around 23.5% where we currently stand. Always got to talk about my boy Bryce Williams. He is priced up as well at 7-3. That's probably a little bit too high there. He is definitely a good look here against Michigan because he's going to play all the minutes in the world. Overall, his role when he was on Charlotte was a lot different than what he's playing here in Nebraska, where he was the total alpha his last season at Charlotte, taking every shot that he could possibly want, making a ton of threes. His three-point percentage has gone down slightly this season. The volume has gone down, and his shot rate has taken a big hit as well. But he has improved in other areas, such as his assists, overall defense, his stocks, and overall his usage rate has started to go back up, and he's just affecting the game in different ways, where he was just relying on his scoring ability only at Charlotte. Now he's got a much more complete game, which makes him viable in a matchup against Michigan, in which he should do very, very well. Last time they played Michigan, they did beat the doors off of them 79-59. Bryce didn't have to play more than 26 minutes and did end up making less than 20 fantasy points. Probably he's in this weird spot because he doesn't have like the most like creative and high upside play here. He's a little bit more of a safe floor option, but also not too sure about using him in single entry either, just because I worry about his opportunities here, and especially with Nebraska now getting a guys back, their rotation's gotten a little bit deeper, and overall they play a little bit of a selfless style, meaning that whoever's open, they're going to kick the rock out, and they don't have a lot of guys that are selfish on this team, which is nice to see. And I think we're going to see this Nebraska team play meaningful basketball deep into March for the first time in quite some time. Miss those Iowa State teams that Fred Hoiberg had back in the mid 2010s. DeAndre Kane, Georges Niang, Melvin Ejim, Monte Morris. Those were some fun teams. Hoiberg can get it done with this group. Rink Mast is where I'm looking at 6'6". Bricked out against Rutgers, had a bunch of turnovers. Obviously, Gary just cooked so hard in that last game. Mast took a back seat. He's been really solid in this rotation, transferring from the mid-major level. He was a big problem against Michigan in their first matchup. 11.6 rebounds, 8 assists, the mini triple-double type of numbers that we like to talk about. I do like him quite a bit at 6'6", and I think he probably becomes my favorite overall option here on this Nebraska team. Right around 30 minutes is what I expect him to play at this 6'6", puts him right around 29 to 30 fantasy points, which will take all day long at 6'6". Of course, that's just a median. Can't account for foul trouble, random injuries, or any other tomfoolery or shenanigans, but in a just straight up medium perspective, Rink Mast is a fantastic play. Same price as Kasai Tominaga. I prefer Mast. I know some prefer Tominaga. He takes all the shots in the world, but that is what he really just does, nothing else. You're not going to see him put up too many other stats on a consistent basis, but he is going to take a ton of shots. It's usually when he's in that low 6K range where you can really start to consider him and has that upside. But if he has a bad shooting night, there's just going to be no way for him to pay off this 6'6" price. Lucky for him, Michigan defense is going to provide very little resistance. He did cook them 3 of 6 from downtown, 8 of 14 overall in their first matchup, 28 fantasy points, 19 of those came from actual points. Just shows you that those peripherals aren't going to be there for Tominaga. Other options on this team, it's fairly lean. There isn't a lot for us to get too excited about, although there are some cheapies nonetheless. Rounding out the rest of their starter 5 is Josiah Alec. I'm not too high on him, although he did have a double-double last time out, 10 points and 12 rebounds. Sam Hoiberg, CJ Wilcher, and Jamarcus Lawrence making up the primary bench pieces there. We're going to be searching for some cheapies. This is a pretty nice slate in terms of, you got Edey obviously at 11K. You've got Sanford and Cal Ware, but you don't have a ton of overly expensive guys where you don't have to necessarily go down and take some of these values that you're not super comfortable with, like a CJ Wilcher at 4-1. He had a nice little run there in the middle part of this season, but for the most part, Wilcher is going to Fitbit it up again and be out there for 20, 22 minutes and maybe not even hit double-digit fantasy points. Not super interesting for me, and I don't want to get involved with him. I'll try to find other value in some of these other games. Shorter slate, but it is all day. These are the type of slates I do like when they last all day, because a lot of times people will avoid some of the later games. They'll play the sure thing in the early games, getting starters in, and they won't deal with injury news, late scratches, anything like that. So what happens is, edge-wise, if a starting lineup change happens, somebody gets hurt, there is some kind of breaking news, a lot of the field, in fact, over half of it, will miss that news and will be able to get on to a guy who is low owned, yet in a very, very good situation. So love these all day slates. All right, next game on this set is Wisconsin versus Purdue. Boilermakers 9-point favorites, total of 148. Same thing as always for me when it comes to Purdue slates. I rarely feel obligated to pay that $11K for Edey. I know a lot of people will, and I expect him to see, somewhere between 35 to 40% rostership. People are just going to jam him in, and they're going to surround him with some of the cheaper options there in hopes that he drops a 60. It's a hell of a lot of raw points to get out of Zach Edey, and especially on a smaller slate like this, where if some of the options below him end up putting up, sub 3x type of scores, and Edey puts up 50 plus, you're going to be dominating the rest of the field, even if you have to surround him with options like said CJ Wilcher. Not trying to pick on CJ Wilcher, it just happens to be the one I'm staring at the moment as somebody you'd have to play in order to fit the reigning player of the year and two-time, player of the year that he is. He's a phenomenal overall option. Obviously, I'm not going to tell you not to roster him if you want to. That's just a huge opportunity cost. But again, it is a short slate in terms of there's not a lot of options, so you can go there if you want. I typically still believe in rostering Braden Smith if you can't get to Edey. I don't believe in that philosophy as much on the bigger slates, 10, 12, 13 games, whatever. But on a short slate like this, where you really, if you're fading Edey, then you've got to be relying on Braden Smith to deliver here. He typically does. He's very capable of matching Edey's raw overall fantasy point total at a fraction of the cost here at 8.2. It is a little bit of a higher price for him, sure, but honestly, at this point, I think Smith should probably be 9K in a competitive game like I believe this will be. I know they're 9-point favorites, but that's fine. It's going to be probably, within 6-7 points most of the game, and that's going to be enough to keep Braden Smith on the floor for those 36, 37, 38 minutes. You look at their last 3 games, which were all competitive. He played no less than 38.5 minutes, and he did put up 31 plus fantasy points in each of those 3, which includes a 41 against Michigan State and a 46 at Michigan, in which he flirted with a triple-double, 11 points, 8 rebounds, and 11 assists. Love Braden Smith. He is such a fun player to watch. Next year, this Purdue team is going to be so different without Edey. He's been there forever, playing second fiddle to T. Will. Smith is only a sophomore, will obviously come back next season. I don't foresee him going into the NBA draft or anything like this. And this team will be totally different. They do have Trey Kaufman-Renn, who I think turns into a star next season, but Smith is going to be able to play a lot more and take a ton of more shots in terms of being the alpha, which he isn't usually. He's more the facilitator, but clearly he's shown an ability to take over games when he has to. Shooting 45% from long range on 97 attempts. He has the 15th highest assist rate in the country at 36.1%, and he's got a steal rate of 3% as well. One of the highest offensive ratings on the team, behind Zach Edey, of course, but ahead of everybody else, except for the number 1 rated offensive player, or I should just say offensive rating in the country, Mason Gillis, who that may surprise you, but Mason Gillis is just at this time of year, Mason Gillis is the guy. I don't know how else to say that. But I love Braden Smith playing 84% of the minutes. He's well worth the salary there if you can't get Edey in. And yes, I know they play different positions, but if Zach gets into foul trouble, it just becomes a whole different game. And Braden definitely goes into what Bill Simmons used to refer to in his old Page 2 articles as FU mode. Basically what Jaden Epps did today against St. John's. The rest of the team sucking. He goes into ISO mode. He takes every shot. He takes every single carry up the court. He initiates the offense. He's assisting or scoring on every single play, taking these pull-up J's from the parking lot, driving into the lane with reckless abandon. That's capable of what Braden Smith can do for this team. And I love kids or players who can go into that said FU mode. Braden Smith definitely can. I can't wait to see next year without Zach Edey. Then you get some cheapies for the rest of it. Lance Jones was pretty awful in the last game. I can say that with confidence because I did use him against Illinois in some lineups. Very disappointed. Did still play 31 minutes. He has been playing huge minutes. Has cooled off a little bit playing he's kind of third, fourth in that pecking order there, coming over from the Missouri Valley. He's fit in quite well, and I think we start to see him play very, very aggressive once again. Now we're talking about a 5.9 price, and I think a lot of people are going to be forgetting that it was only the beginning of February in which this guy was priced at 7.2, 7.3, 7.5. Nobody really rostered him there, but he's been putting up some really big games. The end of January, he put up 5 straight over 30 fantasy points against the likes of Michigan, Iowa, Rutgers, Wisconsin, and Northwestern. Now he's playing that same Wisconsin team in which he dropped 20 real points, 6 rebounds, shot 8 of 14, 3 of 7 from long range, and delivered a 35 fantasy point performance. I like Lance Jones here. Looking at the festivities, last home game of the season for Purdue, they are a relatively young team for the most part, but obviously Edey, Mason Gillis, who else do they got here? Lance Jones. Like, those are the guys that would be honored here in the last home game. I do think Lance Jones is interesting, shooting 35% from long range, and he does have a shot rate that is now up over 25% for the season. In conference play, that number has gone to 26. When you look at what he did at Southern Illinois last year, 32.5% shot rate, 29% usage rate. Both of those were tops in the MVC. This is a real deal type of player. Adding him was a big boost for Purdue because they have those games where, yes, offensively, they're trading 2s for 3s and falling behind. We saw, dreadful losing the 1 seed. If that were to happen again, they have some firepower here with Lance Jones. They're a lot different with him. They've got Fletcher Lawyer, who's a semi-elite 3-point shooter, streaky, but definitely can knock them down. They've got various options on this team that can be utilized to keep them from getting stagnant, or, as I said, trading 2s for 3s. You don't want to have that happen. We saw NC State do that the other day with DJ Burns, and it just didn't work out from a team standpoint. DJ Burns owned, but they weren't able to win the game playing that way. Mason Gillis at 5.2. I'm certainly going to be utilizing him. I would have loved to seen him at 4.5, but he's been playing a lot more lately, and they're utilizing him. Like I said, Gillis is just this like super role player, jack of all trades type where you don't really have to consider him. He's not much of a fantasy asset whatsoever. But as you get into the conference tournaments and the big dance and beyond, you start to get into tighter pricing, less values, less options, worse matchups, and you start to have to almost settle for certain plays. And Mason Gillis over the last couple of seasons has been that guy when Purdue's on the slate in tournament settings that we can use and feel okay about. Okay, at 4.8, 4.9, I can get 3x from this guy. Can I get any more? Maybe, maybe not. But he has been much more aggressive in the last 4 or 5 games. We've seen him take a bunch more 3s. He's hitting them quite well. He shot at least 50% in 3 of his last 4 games from long range. He's rebounding well. He's assisting well. All of his rates have gone up over the last month. And we're talking about a guy who is very capable of delivering 20 plus here, and will have a little extra pep in his step here with the final home game of his career. Don't believe he has any more COVID seasons left. And we're talking about Mason Gillis being a strong overall value, I think, at 5.2. Projections-wise, let's pull this up. He's, as usual, not going to project all that well, but this is one of those plays where I will disagree with how that goes, and I do think we want to consider him for a main team build for sure. Trey Kaufman-Renn is an interesting GPP value. He is one of those guys that, absolutely ripped last summer exhibition season and their foreign trip. He has a ton of upside, but as long as Edey's on the floor and not getting into foul trouble, which hasn't been happening, there's really nothing there for Kaufman-Renn but that 4.3 price. If you're running multiple builds, you're trying to find a way to get some leverage. There is a path here for Kaufman-Renn to pay that off and possibly end up on the optimal, however remote that may be. Fletcher Lawyer at 5.1. I'd prefer Mason Gillis over him, but you're seeing Fletch. He's been knocking down shots. Back-to-back games, over 24 fantasy points, taking a ton of shots. This is what he does. He can get hot. He's very streaky. We know that about him. Probably would see more going towards Lawyer there just because of his secured role, but I honestly do still prefer Gillis. And then you do have Camden Heide, who's been seeing more minutes lately. Not particularly a high upside play by any means, but sub 4K, trending towards about 20 minutes. If you're looking to jam in some of the pay-ups, Camden Heide could be somebody to utilize there. You saw against Rutgers, he got red hot, knocking down 4 threes. Certainly not suggesting that he's going to do that again, but he does have some upside in the right setting here for this Purdue team. On the Wisconsin side, this is a tough spot to really want to use Steven Crowl, even though he's mega cheap. He projected extremely well against Rutgers at only 6'2", 17 points and 11 rebounds. He had a monster second half in that game against Rutgers. Now we're going to be asking him to, bang down low with Zach Edey. This has foul trouble written all over it. I don't know that we can utilize him. It is a really nice price. You go back and look at them. They did lose 75 to 69 at home against Purdue back on February 4th. Crowl had 8 and 5, but he had 4 fouls, just never got into a rhythm. And I think that will probably be the same case here. Very difficult to justify using Steven Crowl. We'll get him at a cheap price here after this game, I believe. We do have an injury designation here for Max Klesmit, who is officially listed as questionable. Some sort of lower body injury. That's kind of the generic term that the Beats use in their win over Rutgers, and that happened in the second half. Did end up leaving that game in the second half, not returning. Usually we're seeing him play 35-plus minutes. That's a ton of minutes. 8 to 12 shots. That's a lot of shot attempts to go around. That is going to go to some other players. We did see the return of Kamari McGee. He played 10 after missing 2 months of the season. He played about 10 minutes there off the bench. Looked pretty solid. We would probably see McGee step into a much bigger role, maybe float towards 20 minutes, maybe even get the start there without. Also, Blackwell, he would be the natural, talking about John Blackwell, the youngster, he would be the natural one to take that starting spot from Klesmit over McGee, but we'll see if they want to continue to use him off the bench. Blackwell has played 23-plus minutes in 3 straight games, and he did just deliver a 31 fantasy point performance, one of his best of his young career there against Rutgers. There is an opportunity for him to step into those shots left behind by Klesmit if he can't go. The rest of the pricing is cheap. AJ Storr at 6'7" has GPP upside. Tyler Wall's only 6K. I do worry about him and his fouls on the road as well here. He put up a monster game. 10 of 16 from the field against Purdue. 20 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. One of the best games of his whole entire season at 46 fantasy points. So he's at least interesting there. Especially without Klesmit, we'll see him take some of those shots. And then the price for Chucky Hepburn at 7.5, that is just way too high for me. It was against Rutgers, and I know he played fairly well. He's still going to get a whole bunch of minutes. I thought McGee coming back might pilfer, 5-6 away from him, but Klesmit being out in that second half, it enabled Hepburn to continue playing most of the game. And I think we'll see that for the foreseeable future here, at least for the next couple of games into the conference tournament. His steal rate is massive in conference play. He has 10 steals in his past 3 games alone. That's been a major reason for his upper tier fantasy production. But 7.5, I usually reserve 7.5 for a different type of player, not a facilitator, part-time 3-point shooter, not to shit on Chucky Hepburn by any means, but I can't imagine us prioritizing a 7.5 Chucky Hepburn. And if I lose because of him going off, so be it. But more often than not, we're going to find him not on the optimal. All right, moving right along here to the next one. Hey, Razzle. I'm supposed to play Edey. I haven't been all season. I don't know, man. I'm not going to be playing him either. I haven't, and it's one of those things where fading him just hasn't cost us, and it's really like I'm just not motivated to play him, even on the short slate here with those raw points. Sure, 56 raw points, that's going to be pretty nice if he gets there. But I just, the opportunity cost is massive, and I really don't feel like throwing a bunch of, Will Schwetter types into my lineup personally. All right, next game on the slate, halfway point here, Rutgers versus Ohio State. It's a pick 'em, as they say. Total 135, lowest on the slate. Mawat Mag has a questionable tag coming into it. He has been in and out of the lineup, been limited, just dealing with various injuries and things. So he's only 4.9. Even if he plays, it's kind of difficult to want to use him. Ohio State's nowhere near a lockdown elite defense that we need to avoid by any means, but there's been some kind of weird stuff going on with this Rutgers rotation. When you watch their games, like, I never want to accuse anybody of not having a high level of caring, but some of these kids just they I don't know. I have to question like Andre Hyatt's effort sometimes. And then just Derek Simpson, who is just impossible to really feel good about using right now. He continues to project well on our sheet, but just have to temper those expectations. 25 to 30 minutes seems inevitable. He is priced at 5.4 now, which is at least a little bit higher. You don't have to feel as bad about he's 4.7. I almost have to play him at that price tag. We don't have to play him at 5.4. Just no consistency there. Jeremiah Williams being around has really taken a ton of the offense away from Simpson. Jamichael Davis has started to play fairly well again after, falling off the face of the earth. Noah Fernandez stepped in and now taken 6+ shots in each of the last 3 games after he was in the doghouse barely playing. Austin Williams is back from the dead. He played 14 minutes against Wisconsin, 16 against Nebraska, 16 against Michigan. So just pilfering enough here. And what we're seeing is these 15 to 25 minutes for all these similar type of guards that are out there. The most intriguing play continues to be Clifford Omarui because he's only 5'8". We were all forced into using him against Wisconsin, whether we liked it or not. He had to pop the shoulder out of place, it sounded like, early in that game within 2 minutes. That was literally the day after Nigel Pack ended up starting and then barely playing because he got hurt again. And it was a very tilting situation, but he did come back in. So good on him for being a tough son of a bitch, because he comes back in like 5 minutes later, does put up 24, pretty solid numbers. Going up against Ohio State at home, 5.8 is way too cheap for Omarui. I would expect him to be pretty high chalk once again. The other option here is Gavin Griffiths at 4.6. 4 of his last 5 games, over 20 fantasy points. He was rock solid against Wisconsin. His first 5 minutes, he could not miss. He was swiping, steals, grabbing rebounds, contributing across the board. Ended up getting, I believe, 3 fouls in that first half, which kind of stunned him a bit. But they did play him, fair amount in the second half. Ended up with 24 minutes and played quite well. This is the youngster. This is a Gavin Griffiths that could have played for a number of P5 programs. So I do think he sees a sizable amount of minutes here as well off the bench. I do like Griffiths at 4.6 as a rock solid main team level type of value for this particular slate. Ohio State, I think they're all the way healthy. There's no, injury designations here for Thornton, Battle, Middleton. They're going to have their full array of options here available. The rotation here under Coach Diebler, interim Coach Diebler, with Holtman getting shit canned, has been a little bit tilting from a DFS perspective. We are, locked into minutes for Bruce Thornton and pretty well locked into minutes for Jamison Battle. And then Roddy Gale is kind of riding a hot hand type of situation here under Diebler. He'll pull Gale when he's not making shots. And then when he's contributing at a high level, we're seeing him eclipse the 30-minute mark. We did see Owen Spencer get that senior day start. Gale ended up playing 28 minutes off the bench. Expect him to get back in the starting lineup. Where it gets a little bit dicey is with these front court options. They have the sophomore, Felix Okpara, who, when given minutes, has been very strong on the glass and as a rim protector. The freshman Devin Royal, who is more of a 3-4 hybrid play, but can play the 5 in a small ball lineup. He's starting to warrant and garner more minutes because of how good he's played. And then you have Zed Key, who's been around forever, probably deserves more minutes than he's been getting. It looked as though Zed Key was primed under Diebler to be getting huge minutes after playing 21 against Purdue. But now he's failed to eclipse 20 minutes in any of the last 4 games. Only at 4.8. Got the start there, obviously, for the senior day. I don't expect him to start. I think Okpara gets back in the starting lineup, and we see the more, traditional or typical lineup of Bruce Thornton, Jamison Battle, Roddy Gale, Felix Okpara, and probably Evan Mahaffey over Dale Bonner as well. So, with that being said, Thornton is a very nice, solid play. He's more expensive at 7.8, but he is the most trustworthy player on the Buckeyes if you can get there, and you should be able to. If you're not playing Edey and you want to play Thornton, you certainly can. Rutgers is a team that does not scare anyone. We don't have to avoid them by any means. And Thornton really, granted it was way back in January 3rd, 2 months ago, he absolutely cooked Rutgers perimeter defense all game long. 24 real points, 7 dimes, 4 rebounds, 41 fantasy points. He has that kind of upside here. I love Bruce Thornton. And he's been pretty decent on the road here, looking at splits, pretty much the same as he's been at home, but he is somebody they're going to rely upon heavily here. And then when it comes to the front court options, like I said, I still lean Okpara. He's still cheap enough at 5.1. He projects on anyone on Ohio State on the sheet, which I will administer, if you will, in the morning. And he projects the best out of all those front court options there, with the expectation that he plays 24 to 26 minutes at minimum. Perhaps we get a closer to 30-minute game like we did against Michigan State, then he would be completely bonkers there. But we have to be aware that still it's on the road and going up against a front court with Cliff Omarui, capable of getting opposing big men into foul trouble. So there is that concern there with Felix. We have to probably temper expectations to a degree. But if he's able to avoid that foul trouble and get those mid-20s minutes, I don't see how he does not pay off the 5.1 price tag. If you play for foul trouble and you think he's going to get more, then at 4.8, he is your probably GPP type of pivot off of Okpara, or you can go down to 4.5 for Devin Royal, who is, like I said, playing so well in this latter half of conference play. He just has demanded more minutes, and dealers had to give it to him. Would love to see him get 20 plus, but we're probably not going to get that. We're probably looking at 16 to 17, but at 4.5, that is enough for Royal to pay off, and he has shown an ability to do so. If you can figure out this Ohio State forward conundrum, I think you do end up having a really good slate. We'll see how we feel in the morning after some rest and how that starting lineup actually shakes out. All right, next game on the slate here, Michigan State versus Indiana. This is a DVP spot. Michigan State going up against the Hoosiers. Indiana's perimeter defense has been suspect most of the season. They've dealt with injuries galore. They do have Anthony Walker on their injury report currently, dealing with a leg issue. Seems like he's trending towards returning if there's any, NIT or postseason basketball for the Hoosiers. But I do wonder if he ends up playing here. Even if he does at 3.5, he doesn't get enough minutes on a game-to-game basis to really matter. It's just hey, if he's out, that's 10 to 12 minutes roughly. That's going to go into Mbako, Renew, and Ware's total, making them very strong overall options. Kel Ware is very expensive for the context of the slate at 8.7. Just dropped a 50 bomb on Minnesota. Overall, with Ware, you know what you're going to get. Pretty much a floor of a double-double. Fantastic overall rates for rebounding and rim protections. Has a very high block rate. That is where he butters his biscuits, if you will. And he had played 39 minutes against Maryland, 38 against Wisconsin, 38 against Nebraska, and 34 against Minnesota. Those kind of minutes for Kel Ware. He's a 10K player. Only getting him at 8.7. Certainly like him there. Malik Renew is a solid discount to Ware at 6.8. He struggled against Minnesota. He is a big-time foul risk, even more so than Ware lately in conference play. We're seeing a lot of, just hacking going on there. He's so aggressive, uber aggressive, and a little undisciplined when it comes to reaching or, not going straight up simple things like that when you're watching games and you notice. His current foul rate is 5 per 40, while Kel Ware's is 4.5. Not a huge difference, but we are seeing a lot of Renew getting into foul issues, and that number has ballooned up over 5 per 40 in conference play there. So Ware is definitely the safer option, but you're paying a much higher price as well. Mbako, the freshman, he's been rock solid. His shot rate is ballooned up to 26.5%. He's shooting 34% from long range. Overall, a nice look there. Kind of a lower end option at 6'4" for most people, but I do think he's probably a little bit safer in this matchup, more so than people realize. He's just so close in price to Renew that most people would just go to Renew, making Mbako a very interesting leverage look. As far as anybody else, non-front court options for the Hoosiers, Trey Galloway, for me, he's a little expensive. I know he hammered Minnesota, 13 points, 11 assists, 5 steals. If you want to chase that, by all means, go ahead. I don't think he has that same level of success here against Michigan State. Their perimeter defense, a little more stout there. Galloway is playing every single minute just because they have so limited options there on the perimeter to use. However, Xavier Johnson has finally found a way to be healthy, which is great. Played extremely well against Maryland, went back to playing the typical XJ that we've seen over the last season and a half, but did eclipse 20 minutes once again. He's only 4'7". I hate to say it, and I can feel the collective groaning, but he is a viable single entry / main team value to be used. And I know there's a high probability that he gives us a 2x score, but there is some flexibility there with his salary still. And assuming he doesn't pick up any injuries overnight, falls out of bed, stubs his toe, gets hurt in warmups, I think we can definitely look at him as a main team guy who is deserving of 30 minutes. And I think he will get 30 minutes against Michigan State here in this, what I believe to be is his final year. I don't think he has any more medical waivers he can use at this point. On the Michigan State side, Tyson Walker had a nice game for us. He's only 6'9" the last couple of slates, projected well. He wasn't particularly high owned. I think people are just kind of maybe a little bit bent on Michigan State or tired of them, whatever you want to say. But Tyson Walker, definitely, this is his time. Everybody, trashing on the Spartans. I still have that Final Four ticket that I got last April. Don't feel anywhere near as confident as I did now as I did then, but I do think the Spartans are going to start to pick it up here. This is the time. I do wonder, and some interesting conversations going on our Discord lately about Michigan State and some of the coaches who long time in the sport, legends with NIL, the transfer portal, and the way recruiting is now, we're seeing them hang it up. And there's a really good chance that Izzo might be next, and that's not based on any inside information, just, looking at the overall landscape of college basketball. It wouldn't shock me and probably wouldn't shock most of you if Izzo did decide to, call it a career here relatively soon. Might the Spartans play a impassioned level of basketball in which they make a deep tournament run here and send Izzo out in a just legendary tournament run? Very, very possible. If that does happen, it will be on the back of Tyson Walker, who you saw took 21 shots in a competitive game against Northwestern, 36 fantasy points. He shot 8 of 21. Not particularly great, 38%, but anyone taking 20 shots, I'm happy. I don't really care. If he shoots 38%, I'll take that volume because more often than not, he's going to eclipse value there at 6'9". Now we're paying up a little bit higher at 8K. It does give me some pause because Walker has had some really, really nasty games in which you just have to scratch your head like, how is it the 19-minute mark of the first half and this guy still has 5? He's done that more often than not this year, which definitely worries me. But this matchup individually against Indiana's perimeter defense is a matchup in which he can take care of business. So I certainly want to have some exposure here to Tyson Walker. I'm more confident in Walker than I am AJ Hoggard. Hoggard, less of a scorer, relying on his peripheral stats. He has a high assist rate, but he's struggled with confidence issues early in the season, you saw the interviews and the quotes and the reports of, him telling Izzo if he's got to come out of the game because he's hurting the team, he has no problem. Like, that just scares me. And I've still had a hard time using Hoggard, even though that happened months ago. I'm still kind of looking at him like, I don't know if I can pay that 7-2 for him. That's kind of how I am still feeling. Akins is cheap at 5'8". He's the polar opposite of Hoggard there in that he's going to rely on his scoring ability. You saw against Northwestern, 0 for 7. What did he do? He put up 3 fantasy points. If he is making shots, then you're going to coast into a solid 4.5x at this price. That is a matchup against Indiana. Again, he should theoretically be able to do well against. No guarantee he pays off at this 5'8 price, but there is going to be minutes, usage, and opportunity for him. So he's in the conversation for us nonetheless. My favorite player in the Spartans continues to be Malik Hall. Gosh, dang, he's 7'6". It's hard to play him. We got him, just hammered 2 games against Penn State. I haven't really used him much this year because the price is so high. He absolutely murdered Northwestern on the glass. It was Nicholson and getting hurt. Martinelli just getting absolutely pelted as Hall pulled down 17 rebounds in that one. Will have his work cut out for him here on the road against that Indiana front court. But special shout out to the way that Malik Hall has been playing here. Just absolutely phenomenal stuff out of him. As far as the secondary players that are, out of the realm of usual starters, Trey Holloman's a bit expensive at 5K, I think, jumping up 1K in price here after a strong performance against Northwestern. He has been one of the most consistent performers off the bench time and time again, so I don't hate the idea of using him there at 5K. That's a value price for sure. The front court secondary plays for Michigan State gets tough. Xavier Booker got a spot start there, played only 10 minutes in their last one. Matty Sissoko got the senior day start. He's pretty well playing 5 to 10 minutes at this point. We're seeing Carson Cooper play around 8 to 15 minutes, and then same thing with Jackson Keeler, Cohen Carr, all of these guys just cannibalizing one another, and they're all stuck in that very Muss-esque Arkansas type of rotation where just none of them are usable. So if you're going to target anyone from the Spartans, you probably just want to keep it to those top 4, and that's going to be Tyson Walker or Jaden Akins for me. All right, moving on to the next game here, we have Illinois versus Iowa. This is one that should have a very high gravitational pull as we get more and more casual players in here. The first thing that those players are going to do, and there's nothing wrong with this. This is a very obvious way to build. Cincinnati game today, we were all over it because you're playing West Virginia. Maybe the total looks a little bit lower than it should be. West Virginia can't defend. They bleed fantasy points everywhere. Let's just stack Cincinnati. And this is going to be, and thankfully it worked. This is going to be a game in which we can do that. Now, prices are much higher in this game than the Cincinnati game, which made it much easier to play 3 or 4 of those Bearcats. Playing 3 or 4 Illinois or Iowa options is going to be much more difficult. Total of 171. Right now, Illinois is a 1-point favorite. That'll probably drift closer to a pick'em and probably is a true pick'em all in all. Iowa is an extremely fantasy-friendly group. They're frequently involved in high-scoring games, and pre-lock their games end up being mostly the highest projected total of the slate. They're 9th in offensive efficiency per Ken Pom. They play at the 26th fastest tempo. This is a much needed win for them. They are grasping the bubble. There were some bubble teams earlier that did drop some games here, so this is going to be a tough one. They certainly need to win this one. Ken Pom has it 90 to 87 in favor of Illinois. I do think you see the Illini and possibly Iowa as well hit the 100-point mark. 4th in offensive efficiency for the Illini. They're 65th in tempo, and this is going to be a game that is certainly going to play out very, very well from a DFS perspective. They did just play about 2 weeks ago. It was 95-85. That was a home win for the Illini. In that one, Coleman Hawkins went berserk. 30 points, 2 rebounds, 5 assists, and 5 steals. Terry Shannon had a rough outing. They did a nice job clamping down. 12 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. Marcus Domask, 8.6 rebounds. And Justin Harmon off the bench had 12 and 4. It was the Coleman Hawkins show. He absolutely put the team on his back in this matchup and delivered. Josh Dix had a solid game, 20 points on the road there. Tony Perkins, 18, 8 and 4. Peyton Sandford, 12 and 7. Ben Krikke, 15 and 5. And then Owen Freeman had 8 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, and a block. The main issue here for the Iowa side is the fouling that has continued to happen for them. Now, being at home, hopefully they're insulated and protected a little bit, because I love this price for Owen Freeman at 6'9". He has been as high as nearly 9K only a handful of weeks ago. His overall rates are phenomenal. Again, I admit it's lazy to compare, but he looks like and plays like and has rates like a young Luka Garza. Garza, who went from a borderline role player early in his career to, secondary option. And then, the last 2 years of his career, he was total alpha. I see the same trajectory for Owen Freeman. Looking at it, the 80th best offensive rating in the country. He gets a ton of bunnies. He's shooting 65% from the field, has a block rate of nearly 8%, steal rate of 3%, drawing 4.5 fouls per 40, and he has a combined rebounding rate of 33%. Everything is great here. His usage is 20%. That'll get higher in time as he becomes more of the alpha next season. The problem here is he has a 5 fouls called per 40 rate, which is obviously massive. In conference play, it's kind of teetered between 4.5 and 5.5, and there is a lot of concern here because in matchups against other capable bigs, especially lately, he has found himself picking up those dreaded 2 first-half fouls, losing time. We saw him against Wisconsin, played 38 minutes. He just absolutely destroyed them. We've seen him play 8 against Michigan State because of fouls, 20 against Northwestern because of fouls, 22 against Ohio State because of fouls. And these are all recent within the last 8 to 9 games. So foul risk, yes. At home, yes. Do we see perhaps a, let's see, Patty McCaffrey get a start here in what I believe is a final home game? I don't know his COVID status there. Maybe, but Freeman should be, barring fouls, in line for a 30-minute game, and that is a very appealing look for me here against this Illinois team. I think he's got some major slate-breaking upside at that 6'9" price, but obviously we are not living in a perfect world in which fouls, you get 6 of them in CBB, and refs are not trying to take over every games. That is the timeline and world I want to live in. Unfortunately, we live in a 5 fouls in college basketball, and refs thinking that people paid good money to come and see them call fouls on people. So Freeman definitely up high on my list. Josh Dix has been fantastic. 30 fantasy points against Northwestern. He has put up 20 plus in 4 of his last 5. That has caused his price to go from 4.8 up to 6.5. That's a pretty tough ask, I will admit, but he has been one of the more consistent options on this team. So still in play. Sandford's pretty expensive at 8.8. That's going to be a tough one. Illinois did a nice job mostly keeping him in check there, and he did foul out in 32 minutes. He shot 3 for 11. So I do have my concerns. Sandford, when he's on, he's very good. There's fewer in the conference that can put up the type of numbers that he does. But the $700 discount to Tony Perkins is just going to be too much for me to walk away from. I think we see more of, and they got to Terry Shen in their matchup. Perkins, ended up dominating that one. But I do see this game trending towards a little bit of a mano-a-mano Perkins versus Shannon showdown, in which they're matching shot for shot. Now, Perkins was just absolutely magnificent against Northwestern, 14 assists. That was a career high for him. He did put up 39 fantasy points. And the nice thing about Perkins lately, and he does have the ability to score 20 real, but 3 of his last 4 games, he's eclipsed 25 fantasy points without scoring more than 10 points. That's a good thing to see, especially when you know that this guy can fill it up at any time. 18, 8, and 4 was the stat line he delivered against Illinois in 33 minutes in a high-scoring affair. Might we get overtime in a game like this? Perhaps. Do you want to get caught without a chalkier stack from this one? Certainly not. There's going to be different ways to go here, and you can't just mindlessly play, 1 through 6 from salary down to cheapest without making some serious sacrifices here. So there are going to be ways to get exposure to this game that maybe aren't as popular. And I think Tony Perkins is one of those guys that does end up being lower owned as much as a guy can be on a 6-game slate. We're still going to be probably seeing 25%, but I don't think we'll see him at like 60% as I think we see on some of these other options. Patty McCaffrey at 4.7. If he gets a start there, he's okay. Even if he doesn't, at 4.7, that's some value that we can certainly look at. On the Illinois side, it is Terry Shannon 8.5, Marcus Domass 7.9, Coleman Hawkins at 7.8. Again, he absolutely decimated against Iowa, and it was comical because we were so high on, or I was, against Penn State DVP spot. He was dreadful, couldn't make any shots, couldn't do anything. And then he follows it up the very next game by dropping a 50 bomb on Iowa like 3 days later. Just pure comedy there on that one. He's probably my least favorite of 3, believe it or not. I will have exposure to Hawkins, and I do think upside-wise, he's as good as anyone on the slate. But Terry, I'm so enamored with Terry Shannon here. On the road, he's going to have to just, take over this game at points. Terry Shannon has been an absolute road warrior. Almost 41 DK points on the road compared to 30 at home. He has just been very comfortable taking games over when they need. And there's going to be, as they say, basketball is a game of runs. There's going to be a time where Iowa maybe extends a lead or, evaporates Illini's lead. And they're going to have to turn to Shannon and to ISO mode, and he's going to have to take over and go into that aforementioned FU mode that he does so well. So Shannon's the guy that I want. It's a lot of money, but if you're not playing for Edie, then you can afford Shannon. All right, 11K, 8.5, upside similar. Yes, you can make that happen with Terry Shannon and in a game environment that is very, very healthy. The secondary options are interesting. Justin Harmon has been a nice value kind of under people's noses. He is 5.2. I think he's a safe option there playing 20-plus minutes. You do have Ty Rogers, who's the Scott Special, our resident Illini superfan in the Discord. He has won a seat. I think he's won 2 seats on the back of Ty Rogers, believe it or not. He hasn't been great lately, but 5K against Iowa. There's definitely upside there, and you get guard forward eligibility for him, which is nice. Quincy Guerrier at 5.7. He's just completely fallen off. He also has guard forward eligibility. I do think he's better than his logs have shown, and I think there's at least one more game looming in there inside of Quincy Guerrier before he calls it a career at the collegiate level, in which he puts up a 35-40 type of fantasy point game. Might it be this one here against Iowa? It might. And I certainly want to have exposure there because that price to me does feel a little bit flimsy. And I know that the logs don't support using him, but this is somebody that I'm pretty confident in this matchup. Similar to the way I was on Claudel Harris of BC the other night. Logs were terrible. Matchup was great. Minutes were there, and he delivered. Dane Danger is a dart throw. He's 4.6, so it's like he's not even that cheap. He has a very high fantasy point per minute number. I will never understand why they don't try to get him more minutes. I know he's a fouling machine, and defensively, he can't step out and defend the 3 or anything like that. So it makes sense why he doesn't, but you'd think they'd be able to hide him a little bit better just so that they could have his elite rebounding and rim protection. But 4.6 is obviously a tough ask there. All right, next game and last game on the slate is going to be Maryland versus top DVP alert, Penn State. Let's go. Penn State is on the slate. That means we want to absolutely target against them. Now, Penn State's a 1-point favorite. I don't know about that. and the total's 142. Also, don't know about that, meaning I think it's going to go over, and I think Maryland is going to win. However, betting on Maryland isn't that fun of a proposition. They have been a very dicey team at best. I really felt like, and maybe I'm too high on Kevin Willard, but I felt like he's going to come in here and absolutely just dominate with this Maryland program. And he was 22-13 in year one, but 15-15 this year. Really just not great. When you go back and look at what he did at Seton Hall and even at Iona, like there's a lot of mediocre years there. And I don't know that Willard's the guy here for this program. The once proud Terrapins program at that. He needs to go out. Recruiting wise, he can handle himself, but he's kind of like that Lorenzo Romar area. Love Romar, by the way. Just got let go by Pepperdine. Come home if you want, my man. Needs to get a like a veteran X's and O type of assistant or associate head coach to help out, because this team, granted, they had injuries to several players. They didn't have a bench really to speak of, but this roster is far too talented to be turning in a 15-15 season and have to make a huge run and win the conference tournament to have any sort of postseason hope. That's a damn disappointment and a really big letdown for the program itself. So with that being said, this is an opportunity for them to absolutely just detonate against Penn State. And I don't think they're going to come out there and like beat them by 20 points or something. Ken Pom does have 70-69 in favor of Penn State, by the way. But I do think they come out and they win this game, whether that's by 1 or 10. I'm not sure. I don't know what to say there, but I am going to be betting the Maryland alt line there to give myself a little bit of a cushion. Jahmir Young, I'm expecting him to play the entire game. He's priced up at 8.6, so you'll have to make a tough decision, Terry Shannon or Jahmir Young. Now, Jahmir Young is tough. He's frustrating because more often than not, you're going to see him kind of stumble out the gates. His first half, maybe he's got 10 points. Maybe he's got, 15 fantasy points. You want more. You want over 20 in that first half of this price. And then the second half, he really just goes into, I'm harping on this FU mode. This is my thing. This is the show's motto tonight. He goes into that FU mode in the second half and just puts up some big numbers. And if he could just match that level of play in the first half, he's putting up 50-60 every single game. And he certainly is capable of doing just that. This is an elite matchup across the board. Perimeter defense is much better for Penn State. That much we know. In the front court, they have been just absolutely ripped, decimated, cracked, crushed, smacked, spanked, whatever you want to say. But you can target Jahmir Young against the Ace Baldwin perimeter defense. It's not as if I'm going to be worried about that. Overall, playing almost 87% of the available minutes. He has a top 30 usage rate, top 60 shot rate, top 80 assist rate, drawing 6 fouls per 40, right around 34% from long range. Jahmir Young playing every minute here. Absolutely love him. Now, the true test is going to be the fact that Maryland is on the road. I don't know what the ref assignments will be yet. I'm really worried that it's going to be bad. Julian Reese has a massive upside matchup DVP spot here against Penn State. Combined rebounding rate of nearly 40%, elite block rate over 6%, drawing 6.5 fouls per 40. His fouls called rate's about 3.7, nothing super drastic by any means, but I am very, very worried that we're going to get a bad whistle here for Julian Reese. And he's not super cheap at 8.3, but the price is definitely under upside wise for what he can do in this matchup, meaning I think he can put up 40, 45 here in this spot if he plays the same amount of minutes that we just saw, 38 against Indiana, 36 against Wisconsin, 37 against Illinois, somewhere in that range. If he gets into foul trouble like he did against Northwestern or Rutgers, then that upside goes in the toilet and he just doesn't pay off. So that is going to be a very tough test for me because it's going to take two things that I am very, very adamant about when I'm building my lineups. Number one, I place a high priority on obvious DVPs and non-obvious DVPs that are starting to emerge. But that's a big part of what I target. I know a lot of other people don't care about matchups. They're just taking rates and guys on the floor and all that, and whatever matchups, to me, they matter. And then second, taking front court players with foul history on the road in late February and March because of the way that refs are trying to make themselves, the center of attention because they want to get these assignments for the tournament. This is a whole thing that I've been reading about, wanting to get the extra money for calling tournament games and, making these calls where maybe in their minds they think, I'm doing something here. But really you're just turning out to be an asshole that's ruining all the fun for all of us as DFS players. So I'm worried Reese gets a bad whistle. And that's going to be a tough one. It's going to put me to the test. He's a great play, though. I do like Jordan Geronimo. He definitely let us down the last couple of games. Haven't used him heavily, but he's been on a couple of slates recently where there was a lack of value, and it was a smaller slate. And priced at 4.7, he made sense, especially against Indiana, his former team. He played 32 minutes. He was on the floor. He just didn't get any shots up. What happens here is Geronimo's, clearly the fourth, fifth, sometimes sixth option on this team. He's going to have to get majority of his fantasy points from those peripherals, rebounds, blocks, steals. He had 1 rebound against Indiana after 2 games ago prior getting 11 against Rutgers. So that really hurt. And now he's priced at 5.3. So he's nowhere near a elite value, but theoretically this matchup, this DVP spot is great for him as well. Just like it is for Reese. He doesn't have the same level of rates and numbers that Reese has, but he does have a combined rebounding rate of almost 20%, 8.5% of it on the offensive rebounding side, has a block rate of 5%. There is some merit here for Geronimo, especially if he's going to play 32 minutes, which was I believe, let's see, the highest he had in over a month. So good to see there. Possibly can get Geronimo into our lineups and feel okay about it. If we can't get to Reese, I think we certainly can. The other options here are kind of spendy for me. Deshaun Harris-Smith, who has been a sneakier value in that he was just so cheap for the minutes he was getting, hasn't really panned out even then. So his price jump to 6K is a little puzzling. I don't know that we can pay that. And then Dante Scott, who probably is slightly underpriced at 6.3, but he's so unappealing as a play. But if you're getting down to last guy in, territory here and you don't want to blow up the rest of your lineup and you've got the 6.3, 6.4 salary left, then I am okay using Dante Scott here, depending on the rest of your Maryland exposure. They are a team that hurts us, breaks our heart often. Dante Scott is, against my better judgment, a main team viable option here. Did take 15 shots against Indiana, 11 against Rutgers, has been just doing a lot more, tons more active. His shot's not necessarily falling, but he is getting that usage and extra opportunities here as Maryland's bench just has been absolutely abysmal all season long. Probably as bad, if not worse, than Kansas bench. That should really tell you something. They do have Jamie Kaiser, who is the freshman, very raw, has had some spot starts here or there, playing about 15 to 20 minutes off the bench. Not an ideal option here, but he is priced at 3.9. Perhaps if we want to play a foul trouble, prediction here on Reese or perhaps Geronimo, then Kaiser gets his way into 20-25 minutes. Now he's a very low fantasy point per minute player, so that additional time is no guarantee of anything. But at 3.9, he gives us the flexibility to maybe stuff in another 8K play or get us to Tony Perkins and Terry Shannon, which is what we want to do in the first place, and let those two drop 50 each, which Kaiser's 3 at that point won't be quite as bad. All right, a quick and easy 6-game slate. We did it. That was very, very efficient. Like I said, I'm kind of tired trying to get some rest here. Now, for the conference tournament schedules, like we're going to be in the Power 5 conference tournaments, Tuesday. What we're going to do for those, because there will be day basketball, of course, there's going to be a influx of content. So we're going to be doing shows Monday night, Tuesday night, Friday, Saturday, and then of course Selection Sunday show. But we're also going to, or I'm going to attempt to do for our community members in Discord, some in the middle of the day, pre-lock for some of these middle slates or showdown slates, or just overall maybe a recap of news. Going to go on and do a Discord-esque type of show where we can just talk and kind of answer any last minute questions and pull everything together there, because there's going to be a lot of coming and going news, and it's going to be tough to keep track of all of it. But I do feel as a community we do quite well with that, so we're going to have that. There will be projection sheets for every single slate, regardless if there's an article or not. There will be a core, there will be player pool. For the main slate, we'll continue to have a write-up as usual. Lots of content planned, and then our betting team absolutely crushing it. Keep checking the FTNbets.com betting trackers there. I will be putting in lots of stuff for the tournament as well, from player props, any number of parlays, alt lines, all that good stuff. This is going to be a good opportunity for us to absolutely crush here. That one shining moment is going to be playing here in a blink of an eye. And, me and Raz are going to be crying in each other's arms here, wishing that it's November and we're talking about the next season of college basketball. Although he's a big MLB guy, so he's probably not as upset about it as I am. All right, let's talk about core here. They're on the as a surface, it looks like a distinct lack of value, and these are the kind of slates that I like, not only because they're all day, but because there is a lack of auto plays below 5K and 4K, which makes it kind of difficult, and people have to really think about what they're doing. And I do think we see ownership balloon on, Ty Rodgers, Jaden Akins, maybe some kind of mediocre plays like that, and Felix Akpara, because they're just the cheapest guys who are getting opportunities, whether the matchup stinks or not, and it allows us to get some of these higher end plays. Core play number one has to be Terry Shannon, like coming off of a poor matchup or a poor game against his opponent last time. Road warrior that he is, I just can't fathom not using him. Paying up for Edie's fine if you want to do that. I have him projected for about 46, but Shannon right now at 38 minutes, which is what I think he gets, right around 42. So for a fraction of the cost, I can get within, that's perfect world, of course. Like if I could have these projections be 100% accurate, then, we'd be doing pretty well, although they were good today. But Shannon certainly wouldn't surprise me if he was the highest raw point scorer on the slate, above Edie even. So that 8.5 price doesn't scare me. I'm all in on Terry Shannon, Scary Terry as they call him, core play number one. And obviously Hawkins and Damask in that consideration as well. We're going to do this like we did with the Epps. I'm going to core Tony Perkins and designate him as the posh play. I feel like Perkins is going to put together such a masterful performance here at sub 10% rostership like Epps. Very similar situation. Obviously, Epps is, playing every minute, has every shot to himself. Perkins doesn't have that luxury for Iowa, but when they get stagnant, they need a bucket. Perkins is there. He's the main facilitator. He can hit shots. He defends well, gets stocks. There's just so much to like about Perkins. And I'm really buying into this Perkins versus Shannon showdown that I've built up in my head. Whether it happens or not, that's the story I'm sticking with. So those two for sure. And then I think as far as cheapies go, like between Akins, Akpara, Namari Burnett even, I think that's where I'm going to end up going, is Namari Burnett. So right now, core play number 3, and this is subject to change by the time we get to lock tomorrow. But he's only 5'3". I suspect he will play 30-plus minutes. He ended up fouling out in 21 against Ohio State. Look for him to get back into that 32, 33-minute mark here at minimum at 5'3". Definitely having to take on almost the number 2 role there, even ahead of Terrace Reed as far as offensive, alpha behind Doug McDaniel, and having to not only create for himself and others, but just really, have the ball in his hands a lot more, even with Doug McDaniel around. So Namari Burnett seems like, to me, one of the safer values, just in terms of he's going to be on the floor playing minutes. Not safe as in he's guaranteed to put up 20 plus, but he'll be on the floor. And that's really all we can do at this point on a slate like this, and, play the whole Hoosiers thing. My team is on the floor. That's how you have to play it. All right, PrizePicks. Let's get into that. Pretty decent PrizePicks day, although BJ Mack made me look like a fool by going off today. By the way, shout out to South Carolina and Lamont Paris. That is going to be such a tough team to get out in a one-game season. Good luck for anyone trying to do that. All right, Longwood versus UNC Asheville. I want to see the fantasy point totals on that in the morning. There are a couple of guys here that I have interest in, like Wally Napper, who's fantastic for Longwood. Obviously, Drew Pember, who is the all-everything. Asheville was on the ropes 2 games ago. He took over, absolutely murdered. He is going to be a big-time problem for this Longwood team. Napper being the main guy on the Longwood side, he's going to be the guy that they rely on heavily. He has some nice options around him. And trying to decide on the PRA or the straight up points. Now, these two teams, they last played on February 21st. It was a win for Longwood, 80-75. Pember got into some early foul trouble, got out of it, but it was one of his more mediocre games, all things considering. And Napper put together a solid 16, 5, 7, and 4 steal stat line. Napper has been playing really well in the conference tournament thus far. Took overtime against High Point in the Big South tournament, knocked off the 1 seed today in that overtime. 30% usage rate for Napper, scored 16, 7 assists, 4 rebounds, 3 steals. The game against Winthrop, in which they were in control from start to finish, 20 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 steals. Needless to say, I'm very high on Napper. He has a point prop of 15.5, which I do like. His PRA, which I've been trying to stay away from, is 23.5. I think Napper is going to be in for 30 plus combined points, rebounds, and assists. So I will go ahead and take the over 23.5 PRA for Napper. He's going to be a nightmare for this Asheville team to deal with, but Drew Pember still exists, and I think this game ends up being very close and possibly going an extra period. Definitely want to tune in to the Big South tournament, watching those two teams play. And then there was almost daring me to take Hepburn at 15.5. I'm not going to. UAB's playing SMU on the slate. Stetson versus Austin Peay. It's just disappointing we couldn't get some of these teams on the slate. Really should have, because there are a lot of good options we could have used to make this slate a little bit bigger. But Big Ten overlords going to get their way. Yaxel Lendenberg's facing off against an SMU team that can defend. It's a 15.5 point prop. That Yaxel prop has been very good to us. It's usually around 16.5 on both PrizePicks and DraftKings. We have been hitting the over a lot on that, and Yaxel has just been delivering some monster performances. That last one against Temple, 19-14, that was a big one for him. Got into foul trouble against Memphis, only 6 points, still eclipsed 20 fantasy points, which shows you just how good and important to this team he is. Now, they played a road game against SMU on the 4th. He had 11 rebounds, but just 9 points, 3 blocks. Overall, it was a fairly solid game. He just couldn't score against them. Looking at this particular matchup now, I think he does, and he's playing so well. They're at home. I look for him to score 20 real points potentially. I'm taking the over 15.5. We get a slight buffer there, usually at 16.5. I'm a big believer in Yaxel Lendenberg, and I think this UAB team can make a late run here and into the conference tournament. So that's where my head is at there. And then in the Michigan State game, Jaden Akins, I mean, he has to score to make value. We know that. It's a 10.5 point prop. I do think he gets hot from long range here against Indiana. So I'm going to go ahead and take his over 10.5 real points there as well. Congrats on being able to keep talking for over an hour nonstop. Got to get back to work now. Thanks for checking out the show. And all I can say is that's nothing. I can do this for hours, and I don't know if I'm not bragging by any means, but if you get me talking about college basketball, I will not stop. It's almost better for me to have a guest sometimes because I will just continue to ramble on and on and on. But people seem to listen to it and like it. So, yeah, I appreciate you saying that, whether that was to troll me or you actually meant it. I appreciate both. All right, that's going to be it. It's a 6-game slate. And yeah, I could probably talk for another 3 hours about this, but I will save you guys that. And we'll get back to business here tomorrow. All day slate, back Monday night. Going to see if we're going to get Mike Kutry on the show for Monday night. Don't tell him, but I'm going to ask him if he wants to come on. It's been a while since we've had him. And then we'll be 9 p.m. PST, a little bit earlier than we've been the last few weeks on Monday night. And into conference tournament play we go for the P5 teams. Lots of seats still available. I believe there's still 10 for the Bracket Mania. And then lots of opportunities here to make some money, whether that's via DFS, PrizePicks, props, all that good stuff. And as Raz announced last night, Survivor in the pipeline for DraftKings. That's a big one. People were asking me about that today. There will be a strategy conversation going on here later this week as we get closer to Selection Sunday, if we get confirmation for sure about the Survivor. Otherwise, I'll see you guys later. Best of luck tomorrow. Lots of green screens. Let's get it done. Let's get to the window, as Randall says, but also show me those green screens in the Discord tomorrow. Appreciate you guys' continued support. I'm going to go get a nap in, and then we'll see you bright and early in the Discord tomorrow morning. I'm out. See you guys.